The decision to have children is often seen as a personal one, driven by biological urges, societal expectations, and the desire for familial bonds. However, beneath this choice lies a profound ethical question. Is it morally permissible to bring a new human being into existence? This question forms the crux of antinatalism, a philosophy that challenges the ethics of procreation. By examining these arguments and addressing common counterarguments, we aim to shed light on the ethical dimensions of having children.
Antinatalism, at its core, is a philosophy centered around the idea that it is morally wrong to bring new human beings into existence. This stance stems from a deep concern for the well-being of sentient beings and a recognition of the inherent suffering that permeates life. Antinatalists argue that procreation, while often driven by positive intentions, inevitably exposes a new being to the risk of pain, hardship, and ultimately, death. By highlighting the potential for suffering, antinatalism encourages us to question whether it is morally justifiable to subject a new being to the inherent risks of existence. One of the most compelling arguments within antinatalism revolves around the issue of consent. When we choose to have children, we are making a life-altering decision on behalf of another human being, one who has no say in the matter. We would never subject an existing person to the potential harms and suffering that life entails without their explicit consent. Yet, when it comes to bringing a new life into existence, we often fail to extend the same ethical consideration.
This is not to say that all parents subject their children to intentional harm. However, even in the most loving and nurturing environments, suffering is an inevitable part of the human experience.
By bringing a child into existence, we are essentially gambling with their well-being, exposing them to the risk of suffering without their explicit agreement.
Life, while often celebrated for its beauty and potential for joy, is also inherently intertwined with suffering. From the moment we are born, we are vulnerable to physical pain, emotional distress, and a myriad of challenges that can lead to suffering. Antinatalists argue that even in the best-case scenarios, where individuals live long, healthy, and fulfilling lives, suffering is an inevitable part of the human experience. To bring a child into the world, then, is to knowingly expose them to this inherent risk. By choosing to procreate, we are essentially making a gamble with the well-being of our future children at stake.
Section 5. Counter-arguments to antinatalism. Examining common objections. Antinatalism, while raising important ethical questions, often faces criticism and pushback. One common objection asserts that life is inherently good, that the potential for happiness and fulfillment outweighs the risks of suffering. Critics argue that focusing solely on the negative aspects of existence paints an incomplete picture, neglecting the beauty, love, and joy that life has to offer. Another counterargument centers around the human instinct to procreate. Procreation, they argue, is a natural biological drive, a fundamental aspect of our existence.
These counterarguments, while valid, warrant careful consideration.
Section 6. The value of non-existence. Absence of suffering as a moral good. Antinatalism introduces a concept that often challenges conventional thinking, the value of non-existence. While we typically associate existence with value, antinatalists argue that in the absence of a conscious being to experience life, there is no suffering. This absence of suffering, they contend, holds inherent moral worth. When we bring a child into the world, we are not simply creating a life with the potential for both joy and suffering. We are also creating the potential for suffering that would not have existed otherwise.
Section 7. Statistical insights, suicide rates, and the prevalence of suffering. While philosophical arguments form the foundation of antinatalism, statistical data provides further weight to the concern for potential suffering. Suicide rates, for example, offer a stark illustration of the prevalence of suffering in the world. According to the World Health Organization, over 700,000 people die by suicide each year, making it a leading cause of death worldwide. These figures represent only a fraction of the individuals who experience suicidal thoughts or attempts, highlighting the widespread nature of mental health struggles and the profound suffering they entail. While suicide is a complex issue with multiple contributing factors, its prevalence serves as a stark reminder of the very real potential for suffering that exists in the world. These statistics underscore the antinatalist argument that by bringing a child into the world, we are exposing them to a non-zero risk of experiencing such profound suffering.
Section 8. Rethinking happiness. Balancing potential joy with inherent risks. The desire to share the joys of life is often cited as a primary motivation for having children. We long to witness the wonder in a child's eyes, to experience the unconditional love of a family, and to pass on our values and experiences to future generations. However, antinatalism prompts us to re-examine this motivation, urging us to balance the potential for happiness with the inherent risks of suffering that accompany life. While it's true that life offers moments of profound joy, love, and fulfillment, it's crucial to acknowledge that these positive experiences do not negate or erase the suffering that individuals inevitably face. Furthermore, happiness is a subjective and fleeting emotion, influenced by a myriad of internal and external factors.
Section 9. The moral imperative. Considering the well-being of future generations. Antinatalism extends beyond individual choices, raising broader ethical questions about our responsibility towards future generations. If we accept that suffering is an inherent part of life, then we must consider whether we are morally obligated to minimize suffering for future generations. Each new life brought into the world has the potential to experience a range of suffering, from minor inconveniences to profound pain and loss. While we cannot eliminate suffering entirely, we can choose to limit the number of beings subjected to it. By choosing to have fewer children or to remain child-free, we are effectively reducing the amount of potential suffering in the world.
Section 10, Conclusion, a call for conscious procreation. The decision to have children is deeply personal, often driven by a complex interplay of biological urges, societal expectations, and the human desire for connection and legacy. However, beneath the surface of this deeply personal choice lies a profound ethical dimension that warrants careful consideration. Antinatalism, while often misunderstood or dismissed as a fringe philosophy, challenges us to confront the ethical implications of bringing new lives into existence. By highlighting the inherent risks of suffering, the problem of consent, and the moral imperative to minimize suffering for future generations, antinatalism encourages a more conscious and compassionate approach to procreation. This is not to say that having children is inherently wrong or that all parents inflict suffering upon their children.